So we really need to talk about resistance, in particular, resistance to the 3D reality. And I know for those of you who watch me, we've touched on this before because it's extremely important. But today I actually have two success stories that are really going to drive home what resistance to the 3D really is, the different forms that it can take and how to address it, because I think a lot of us kind of think we know what resistance to the 3D is, but we're still not catching ourselves in it in the ways that we should. So these two success stories today are going to entertain you and give you some like real world mirroring of like, oh, this is how it should be. So I'm excited to get into all of this with you today. But before we dive in, I need to introduce myself to those of you who maybe don't know me. You're clicking on this video for the first time. You never saw me before. My name is Genevieve and I'm a manifestation coach. On this channel, I try to go really in depth into the nuances of manifestation, in particular, law of assumption. Law of assumption is definitely my jam, but I talk about all kinds of different things that are supportive to a conscious manifesting journey. And I have all kinds of things going on right now. So for one, I am super excited that in January, I'm going to be doing a January manifestation challenge. I haven't done a challenge quite like this before, and I'm super excited about it. Every single week, for those of you who sign up, I'm going to be sending you a very in-depth email with very specific instructions and guidance on like what I want you to focus on for that week. So it's going to be 5 emails for the whole month of January. Every Monday you get an email. And this challenge, I keep saying, is very much about results. Obviously, like everything we're doing as manifestors, like we want to get results. But this challenge in particular, I am really kind of being maybe even a little bit hard on you guys in terms of like, this is for people who are just going to do what I say. Just do what I say for the whole month. Don't question it. Don't overthink it. Don't send me a defensive thing about your victim story. Just do what I say and see what happens. That's kind of the vibe of this challenge. So if you are in that kind of a position where you're like, yep, I done overthinking, done thinking that I know the way to do this better than somebody else. I want someone else to give me very specific instruction on what to focus on and what exactly to do. This challenge is for you. So there is a link down below to sign up for the challenge. Again, it starts on January 1st. The last day to sign up is December 31st. So unfortunately, if you're watching this too far in the future, you already missed this, but maybe someday in the future, I'll do another challenge for a particular month. Who knows? But so yeah, you only have until December 31st to sign up, and then doors are closed. And then for the whole month of January, you and I will be doing this challenge together. So again, the link for that is down below, but also down below, I have all the links to my other courses that are always available. So if you want to do a course that I have made, please see all that stuff down below. You can also join the membership portion of this channel where I have more resources and cool things that you get for the different tiers that you can sign up for there. So anyway, let's check out the links below for all of the different ways and levels of engaging with me. If you like me as a coach, there's all kinds of ways to work with me deeper down there. Okay, let's talk about resistance to the 3D. So I feel like I just want to tell you the story and then we'll talk about it afterwards, because I think the story in and of itself is going to highlight what I want you to get. And as I said at the beginning of this video, this is a personal success story that actually just happened to me. So it was a good reminder for me as well, because as I said before, sometimes we don't even realize how much resistance we're still in until something like my success story happens. So let's get into this. So to start, I have to say, this is one of my specific person success stories that I've had in my own life. This is not a romantic specific person success story. I feel like that's important to say. Well, one, because it's true, it's not a romantic SP story, but also because I think people sometimes get so like locked and loaded on like the romantic SP being the only person that they manifest in their life that they forget they can manifest everyone in their lives. In fact, I encourage you to do that because it doesn't really make sense. Like you aren't really being the operant power of your life if you're like, oh yeah, I'm the operant power when it comes to my SP, my romantic SP, but all the other people, I'm still a victim to them, or I don't change them, or what. Like it doesn't make sense, and it's also making you not a very like well-rounded manifestor potentially to not be manifesting other people in your life. Anyway, that was a side note. So this was a specific person manifestation for me, and it was a really important one, actually, in terms of like this person I have been consciously manifesting probably for almost 2 years. So that just shows you how much resistance I've been in when it comes to this person, because yeah, 2 years is kind of a long time to be manifesting them. Of course, I'm not like, it hasn't been like every day I've been focusing on this, because it just hasn't. But still, it's been a long time. There's been a lot of resistance in me about this. And I'm also going to be very, very vague in talking about the circumstances or this person, because there are people who know me personally who watch this, and I really don't want to give away like what this is. So I'm not going to describe anything about this person or the circumstances around it. Just know, all you need to know is that this person is important to me. And again, it's been some time that I have been trying to change the dynamic between me and this person. But again, I have been in a lot of resistance to it, even though I've wanted it. So here is what happened first. I unexpectedly saw this person at an event a while ago. This was like maybe a couple months ago. And I didn't know I was going to see this person there. And on that day, I had gone into that event feeling how I would describe this as egoically confident, but pretty disconnected from my body. I wasn't really being genuine to my real feelings that day, and I realized this later. So keep this in mind, the thing I'm saying, and I'll talk about this more, that I was going into the event kind of in my head feeling, I guess, confident, but really all it was I was in my ego sort of trying to affirm for the things I wanted in terms of how this event would go, but I was really not being honest with myself about some deeper things going on within me. So keep that in mind, that that was my state of being going into this event. And then I go into the event, did not know that this particular person was going to be there. So I see the person there and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to have movement with this person finally, because I didn't know they were going to be here. So obviously today, me and this person are going to have like a great, conversation or whatever. But again, this is in my ego, doing what I know I should do as a manifester, trying to be like positive and all that fun stuff. But as the course of that particular event went on, I was slipping further and further into insecurity again. I was getting weirdly triggered by small things because I kept noticing that 3D reality at that event was not matching my original intentions coming into it. Like, remember I said I went into it feeling egoically confident, where I was a little too reliant on needing the event to go well in order for me to maintain my confidence. And so the moment that I started noticing like, oh, this kind of isn't going the way that I thought it would, or it's kind of not what I wanted that's happening here, I started to very quickly crumble. When I say crumble, of course I wasn't like having an emotional like freak out or anything, but I just mean internally, I was not maintaining any sort of actual empowerment. Like, I was really starting to get more and more momentum, more and more triggered in noticing like, this is not what I want, and then feeling really resentful about it as it went on. I'm starting to think things like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been trying to manifest this person for, this amount of time, and now they still aren't even talking to me. They just seem so happy to ignore me. So you see what I'm doing here? I'm really noticing. I'm gaining a lot of momentum in noticing, oh man, this isn't working for me. Nothing's working for me. I'm really noticing. I have more faith in this current 3D that it's showing me and how real it is than I have faith in myself. So that was kind of the whole vibe of that event. I didn't even really talk to that specific person really at all the entire time, and I left feeling extremely defeated, basically, deflated. That's a better word to put it. And I know that you're like, Genevieve, you're supposed to be telling a success story and not a failure story. But that part of it is extremely important. And this is, again, another mirror for you guys, because when you have moments in the 3D that are kind of purgy in terms of like, all of a sudden you're really getting caught up in things not being the way you want, there's often a lot to learn from that. And I am so grateful that whole thing happened at that event in terms of even my like reactions to it, because it taught me something. Because then recently I was at another event, and this other event that I knew that, again, this specific person was going to be at, I went in being like, a scientist, being like, okay, I cannot repeat the things that I did before. Like, I know I'm going to see this person again. I know it's going to be like potentially a similar outcome as what happened before. So I need to go into this like completely not dependent upon what happens at this particular event. I hope you guys are following me. At the first event, my ego was very dependent upon how it went in order for me to maintain feeling good or feeling confident. This time I was choosing, you know what? I'm gonna go in with low expectations. I'm gonna go in not even caring what happens. I'm just gonna go in knowing that whatever happens at this thing, I'm gonna make the best of it. It is what it is. I cannot go into this particular event being attached anymore. And when I say attached, I mean attached to the 3D. I just cannot care at all what the 3D shows me in this particular moment. At the first event, I really cared. I was really looking for, where's the proof that like my thoughts are working? Where's the proof that my affirmations all this time have been working? I was really caught up in that. And because I was really caught up in that, I was really noticing it not happening. And I was really making meaning of it not happening. This time, I took the total opposite approach. I was like completely detached to the point that I genuinely was like, I really don't even care what happens at this thing. I am just gonna go. I'm gonna just make the best of it. I am just gonna do whatever I need to do. And I was much more aligned and compassionate towards my own feelings. Because remember what I also said about the first event? That I was really I was living from my ego, and I was a little bit detached from my actual feelings, like my actual embodiment. I was just kind of really in my head. And this time I was really acknowledging that it's like, yeah, I feel nervous going into this event. Yeah, I feel a little even like sad going into this event. But I still know I'm going to make the best of it. And I still know that it's fine for me to have low expectations and just be like, whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to go be myself, show up for me, as me, and just see what happens. So I was much more embodied in terms of acknowledging my authentic feelings. I was also, again, really detached from the 3D. And when I say detached, I mean genuinely. Like, I really wasn't even trying to, force my thoughts or think very specific conscious thoughts. I really was just like, whatever happens, happens. I'm just gonna go make the best of it. And as you have probably figured out by now, I had a completely different outcome at this second event than I did at the first one. And it genuinely kind of surprised me because it reminded me, oh my God, even I, the manifestation coach, when it comes to my own life, can sometimes forget about this 3D attachment that causes resistance thing. Because when I went in totally detached, totally just like almost like giving up, but not really, it was more that I was much more sovereign within myself again. Because as I say to you guys all the time, the way we manifest is we acknowledge, like, I don't really need anything from this 3D. Like, I am not the 3D. The 3D is a reflection of me, but what I am is what's really going on in here, in my connection to like this eternal, amazing God stuff that is like put me on this planet to begin with. That is what I am. And if I become reliant on this external 3D to validate me, and I become attached to like needing the mirror to like prove me right at exactly the time I want it to prove me right, then I'm not really in power. I'm not really in my fulfillment. I'm not acknowledging that like fulfillment comes from the way I take care of myself in every moment. It doesn't come from instant 3D validation. So I went into this, and again, my expectations were low. I'd kind of almost even given up. I had so many great conversations with lots of different people, which was also totally different than the first event. And when it comes to this specific person, we talked so much, like so much more than we have, again, in almost 2 years. I haven't really talked to this person. We talked about so much stuff. All of the things that I had been imagining from before were coming up very naturally in our conversation. And I was just in total just non-resistance in terms of like, I was finally like just back in my body, back in the moment, just allowing the 3D to come to me. So it was a great humbling reminder of like, oh yeah, we cannot be attached to 3D validation at all. And the irony, this huge paradox of it, is that when we're so accepting of the current 3D, and again, kind of have these like low expectations of it because we know like, I don't need anything from the 3D, I am the magic here. The paradox is that the 3D does tend to validate you very quickly. So what does that story mean about you? So this is a reminder to you that if you are starting to look for validation, if you are starting to notice like, oh, it's been like 3 weeks and nothing in my reality has changed to validate me. When you move from your internal consciousness of knowing that you have everything within you right now, when you move from that to your external point of reference in terms of being like, the external is where the proof comes from. The external is where the magic happens. When you move from internal to external, that is when things fall apart. That is when you are in resistance to the 3D, because you are like in your head, like pushing, like, okay, this is happening, this is happening, this is happening. And then you're looking and you're like, oh my God, it's not happening. Oh my God, like that is resistance to the 3D. So now I want to tell you this other success story, because this was so crazy. My client messaged me this morning, like on the day that I'm going to film this video. And she told me this story and I was like, oh my God, this is so perfect, because this is so exactly what I'm going to make a video about today. So that's why I have 2 success stories today, because of course, manifestation, everything is just aligned synchronistically. So the other success story that is so perfectly this, she messaged me and said, okay, so for context about her, so she and her SP, and it is a romantic SP, she has not talked to him in like, I want to say like 2, maybe even 3 months. And she, yeah, she had messaged him like 2 or 3 months ago, and he just kind of like ghosted, and he hasn't talked to her since. So again, that's kind of a long time that she has not spoken to him. He hasn't spoken to her. So she messaged me and said that yesterday on Christmas, so today that I'm filming this, it is the day after Christmas. So yesterday was Christmas for me in my current time presence. So she said yesterday on Christmas, she was manifesting that she was going to get a Merry Christmas text from him. And she was noticing that she like couldn't stop like obsessing over it. Like she was constantly checking her phone. Then she was going in her head, kind of doing a lot of overthinking. Well, maybe I should text him first. And then she's like, no, I shouldn't text him first. And she was really like not in the state of just accepting the ease of it. Instead, she was in the, how do I make it happen? The state of, I don't have it. How do I make it happen? So she's checking her phone. She's like affirming, but like in that kind of forced way where you're kind of like, oh, I gotta make it happen. I gotta like, it's like a pushing on the 3D, that kind of like affirming. I think you might know what I'm talking about. There's a difference between affirming that's just like, oh yeah, I'm thinking this thought because it's already true. And then affirming that's like, almost like affirming at the 3D. Like you're affirming like, I'm gonna make it happen. If I just yell it at the 3D enough in my mind, that'll just make it happen. Those are 2 different states of being. And the first one, where you're just thinking the thought because you're just reminding yourself, oh yeah, I've already got it, so I'm good. That's different than, you know, pushing against the 3D. So anyway, she was in that state of kind of like affirming, she was like really forcing it, trying to make it happen, checking her phone a lot, feeling discontented about it, feeling like, it's just, I guess it's just not happening. So what happened was she had almost like an exact same thing happen to her, because, you know, Christmas is going along. The end of the day comes. She noticed, you know, she still doesn't have this Merry Christmas text from him. And so at the end of the day, she was like, you know what, whatever, like the day's over. Like it doesn't even matter. Like I'm going to give up. I don't even care anymore. And she, because she went into that finally just like, okay, I'm just going to let it go. Like I'm not going to get my phone anymore. The day's over, like whatever. So she went into that same thing I was talking about before, in terms of like kind of going back to low expectation, in terms of like, whatever, doesn't matter, just gonna move on. And then this morning she got the text from him wishing her a Merry Christmas and said some other stuff. And again, that's kind of amazing that after like 2 or 3 months of like not talking to each other at all, she was very purposeful, obviously on Christmas, of like intending to get this Merry Christmas text from him. And she did achieve it, but she only achieved it after she stopped being in resistance to the 3D. She stopped battling the 3D. She stopped noticing the 3D. She stopped looking at the 3D. She just was like, frick it. I'm just done. I'm just going to release it to the universe, and I'm just going to go about my life in a happy way. And again, it's paradoxical because it can feel like us. Part of the reason our ego has so much trouble with this is because the ego thinks that the more it holds on to something and like takes control of it, that that's somehow like helping it. But your ego has no idea how to manifest. I mean, your ego is a player on the team in terms of like the parts of you that are used to manifest, but your ego is not the MVP of the team or even the quarterback of the team, because your ego, again, it's almost more like the liability player on the team, where your ego's job is to simply like not interrupt like what you've intended. Your ego's job is to not decide that it's unsafe to have what you want. Like that's the job of the ego, is to simply not distract you, not tell you that it's unsafe, or not tell you that you should go looking for it, because your ego wants to do that. It wants to like keep this tight grip on it, because your ego thinks, oh, well, if that's what we want, we should just wrestle it to the ground, because your ego is so 3D based. It doesn't know how else to do stuff except like in this very like hard 3D on 3D sort of approach to things. So it doesn't make sense to your ego that letting something go is somehow going to bring it to you. Your ego thinks, well, if you let it go, it'll never come back. It's like you can't let it go. You've got to keep gripping onto it and looking for it and thinking more, because if you don't see the result like right away, that means you've got to think about it more and solve it more and like figure it out more. But really, all of that is, again, resistance. If you're trying to solve something or figure something out, or you're affirming extra, extra, extra because you think if you affirm extra, that's pushing on the 3D to like make it give it to you. It's like trying to rock a vending machine. Like you think if you just affirm enough and rock the vending machine, it'll make the chips fall out of it. That's such a random metaphor that just came to my mind. But that really is how your ego likes to think of this process. Oh my gosh. So this is your huge reminder to really be in acceptance of wherever the current 3D is at. Because remember what I was saying about my own experience of like, I went into that second event just being like, I just accept it all. Like whatever happens, I'm just going to make the best of it. And that's exactly the kind of attitude I want you to have about your life. Like you're not pushing on like, okay, right now it has to happen. It has to happen. Because again, I hope you can feel how that kind of pressure is not a feeling and a knowing of I already have it. Everything is easy for me. I am my own fulfillment, and I'm simply acknowledging my preference. That's not what's happening when you're in that much resistance to noticing the 3D. So when you're in so much acceptance about, okay, whatever happens, I really will be okay. Whatever happens, it doesn't matter. Everything's working out in my favor eventually. I just don't care anymore. Like that kind of state, I know it's so paradoxical, but when you're in so much acceptance about wherever the 3D is at right now, it doesn't matter. It's not a threat to me. It doesn't bother me. I'm not bothered by it. I'm not going to make it mean anything about me. That's a huge one. Like how I said I was doing in that first event, where I was making the 3D mean a lot too. Like I was looking at that particular specific person and making meaning of the fact that they weren't talking to me at that moment. And I was also doing that about other people and things at that particular event too, where I was just like, I was back in the mode of like looking at my 3D and being like, oh, and this means this, and oh, this means this, and this is not going well. And I was deferring to the 3D as my reference point for what was going on for me. And so of course I was powerless. I was totally reliant on the 3D in that moment. And I wasn't accepting of where the current 3D was at. I wasn't accepting at all. I was very resistant to it. I was actively threatened by it. I was making that 3D mean something about me in a negative way. And the second event, I was totally just like, whatever happens, happens. It doesn't matter to me anymore. It's okay. And that is the perfect state I want you to be in. So if you are checking your phone constantly for a text, if you are noticing time, if you are doing anything where you're looking at the 3D reality and being like, wait, this means that I don't have it. And you're doing that in any kind of like a subtle way, you're not obviously doing it correctly in that moment. So this is really important. The other thing though I want to say about this, because this is also a thing I did, especially when I first discovered manifesting, I would hear about things like detachment and, just let it go and, accepting the 3D or whatever. And I would do it in this very like, okay, I'm gonna let it go, wink, wink, because it's like, okay, I'm gonna like do it so that then I can get it. Like I would be trying to use the ideas of, letting go of the outcome and being more detached from the 3D. I was using those concepts in a way that I wasn't really letting go. I was thinking like, okay, I'm going to be detached because if I'm detached, then I'll get what I want. And that's not genuine. That's still you being very attached, thinking that you can employ the idea of attachment to like manipulate. And that's not genuine. Like, you cannot trick yourself. You cannot trick your higher being. You can't trick the 3D reality, because again, it's a perfect mirror. It's always showing you like what's genuinely happening within you. It's not trying to be mean to you. Like, again, to use my own example, at that first event, I'm actually so grateful that that happened, because it showed me something that I wasn't really conscious that I was doing. Like I said, that manifestation had been like 2 years in the making. And again, I knew I was in some resistance to it, but I didn't know how much resistance I was to it until I was at that event and I saw in real time like what kinds of thoughts and energies and like suppressed emotions I was still holding towards that person, and also some other people, obviously. So when I really owned that and learned from it and reminded myself in a genuine way, like, okay, genuinely let go. We're not letting go in a way of like, oh, I'll pretend to let go and then it'll give me what I want. I genuinely didn't care anymore. I genuinely was like, I just want to have a good time for myself. Whatever happens, happens. I genuinely don't care what the outcome is next. And when I got into that, that is when, because also, this is the other thing I want to say, your intention, your manifestation is known, and it is a timeless thing. So even though I haven't actually affirmed or even thought about that particular specific person for a while, all of the other affirming and thinking about them in a conscious, positive way still exists. It's still in the timeless, shapeless vortex, I guess, to use the Abraham Hicks term for it. It's still out there. It doesn't go away just because I hadn't been affirming for the last week or whatever. It still exists. And the moment that I finally got out of my own way to receive it, it finally had some space to come in. So I really hope this is making sense. You do not need to be constantly like gripping your manifestation, like thinking that you always have to be thinking about it. The only reason that we're practicing thinking about it often in a very concise and specific way is because you want to train your brain to relate to that thing in the different way. You're not thinking about it all the time because you're gripping it and you're like, oh, if I hold it really close to me and, you know, make sure it's always at the top of my mind, that makes it gonna happen sooner. Like, no, that's again still resistance, because you're fearfully like, it's not happening yet and I just gotta keep holding it, keep thinking about it to like make it happen. And again, that's another version of resistance to the 3D. I want you guys to be so accepting of exactly where your life is at in this moment, not make any part of it wrong. This is actually huge, because so many of you have gotten into a lot of suffering because you keep noticing again that your 3D isn't what you want it to be, and then you beat yourself up about it. You make it mean something bad about you, and we've got to stop doing it. The more you're just so non-resistant to like, okay, wherever my 3D is currently at, that's fine. It's not a threat to me. I'm not going to make it mean anything bad about me. There's no problem to fix here in the current 3D. I'm totally just accepting of like exactly where it's at. And then continue to be your own source of fulfillment. And of course, continue to intend for what you do want, but not in this like forced way. Like, remember what I was saying, like there's a difference between affirming and thinking in a way that's like pushing against the 3D. Like, come on, do it, do it, do it. Like, I'm thinking about it, so do it. That's different than affirming and thinking because it's like, oh yeah, I know that I have this and I'm thinking this way as a reminder of like, oh yeah, that's the reality that I'm choosing. That's what my preference is. That's what my intention is. That's what I know is accessible, and I can even tap into the feeling of it a bit because it's like, oh yeah, I can totally have that. But you're not like needing the instant reflection in terms of like, why isn't the 3D validated me? We're not doing that anymore. So anyway, this video has gotten extremely long and a little bit rambly, but I really hope that this is making sense, because again, I get that the paradoxical nature of it can be confusing to people, but this is why, as a lot of you have experienced, it's easy to manifest things we don't care about because you have no resistance to those things. You're not making the absence of those things mean that your life sucks or mean that you aren't loved or mean that you aren't chosen. You're just like, oh yeah, that's my preference. And then you just go about your life. And then it's like, whoa, there's that thing that I said that I wanted. It's here. How cool. And that's it. You weren't obsessing over the lack of it. You weren't noticing the lack of it. You were just, yep, that's it. That's what I want. And then eventually it's like, boom, there it is. So really, really important. So I really hope that you can learn from my own failure that then turned into a success story, which again, I'm so grateful that it happened that way. And that's another kind of mirror I want to put up for you guys, is I want you to also be grateful for the moments where 3D reflects to you who you're really being. Because it's not the universe or God like trying to punish you. It's nobody's saying that you can't have what you want. The 3D, if it's giving you a purge or it's giving you the opposite in a certain moment, it's trying to show you like, hey, this is something you haven't really addressed. Like, you might want to address this if you want this to be different. Like, here's your resistance. We're just putting it right in your face. This is what you're resisting. So look at it as like, thank you 3D for showing me, because I didn't know that was really happening in me to the extent that it was, but now you've shown me, and so now I get it. So that's big, and that's, like I said, that's the attitude that I took about that after that first event. And anyway, and obviously it totally turned around after in the second event, and it was because I was so genuinely detached. I went in with like low expectations of the 3D, and knowing that I had myself, no matter what happened, I was going to make the best of it. And I just kind of didn't care about the 3D anymore. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this extra long video today, and let me know what your thoughts and questions are down below. Again, if you want to sign up for the January challenge, you have, I'm trying to look at my calendar, you have until the 31st. So I think that's like from the day I'm posting this, like maybe 5 days, but you could be watching this at any point, so who knows. So sign up now so that you do not miss out, and I'm really excited to do this challenge with you. Again, it's going to be very specific in terms of the instructions and all of that, so I'm excited to do that with you. I will see you guys in my next video. All right, bye.